Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we already went through the schedule, but that was more of just a data dump as it came out live. Now we've had a chance to really pour through it and circle the games that stand out the most to us. What are the most anticipated games coming up in the 24-25 schedule for the Bucks? We dig into our lists and take your feedback coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. As always, free and available wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And for those of you watching us on YouTube, it is a live recording today, so we certainly welcome your feedback on any games that we missed on our list or disagreements that you would have. So drop those in the comments. We'll address those afterwards and during the show as well. But Camille, I suppose let's just get into it. So we went through the schedule as a whole when it came out, 2 weeks ago already?
Yeah.
And I mean, we were live as it was released, didn't really have much time to put together any thought other than doing the counting on the fly of how many back-to-backs is this? But now we're a couple of weeks removed from it. We've had some time to digest it, and we thought, all right, what are the games that maybe not stand out the most, but have us up the most, that we are most looking forward to, the most anticipated games on this year's schedule? So we have each put together a list of 5. I think we both have a few that just missed the cut. We'll get to in the honorable mentions. But let's start with your list, your 5 most anticipated games for the Bucks this season. And I'll preface with this. We didn't go back and forth.
No.
This is the first time I'm hearing your list. This is going to be the first time you're hearing mine. I'm curious to see how much overlap we have.
Yeah, and I'm also curious as to why these matchups will be anticipated for you, because it could be a different reason than what it is for me. So the first game for me where I was like, I cannot wait to see this one is November 22nd against the Indiana Pacers. It's an ESPN game. It is the second NBA Cup game for the Milwaukee Bucks as well. Their first one is the prior week against Toronto. It's the first of the 4 Indiana matchups that the Bucks will have this season. It's a Friday night home game. And I mean, like, it's beef now. Like, how can you not want to see Bucks Pacers after everything that happened last year? So for me, that was the number 1 game on my list, which actually surprised me going through it of like, wow, I really want to see Bucks Pacers again. And I wouldn't have thought that after seeing them 85,000 times last year.
Your number 1 game is the Bucks and the Pacers. I mean, who would have thought a year ago we would be saying this of here's the new rivals and this is the most anticipated game?
Yeah, I wouldn't have. But that has definitely gone up the standings for me. And the number 2 is the season opener against Philly. ESPN game. I mean, it's the first game of the season, the first time you get to see each of these teams. The new look 76ers against the Milwaukee Bucks. And you have 2 of the top players in the East there with Embiid and Giannis going up against each other. Those matchups are always fun. I know it's a joke now of like this is tradition for Bucks and 76ers to kick off the season. But again, it's just that initial excitement of the season's beginning. It's against Philly. We haven't seen this iteration of Philly before. I'm looking forward to that one. So that came in at number 2 on my list.
Glenn Doc Rivers back in, I mean, I know he was there last year, but back in Philly now with more stakes too. And the 3rd straight year that these 2 teams open up the season. So some of the familiarity there as well. I'm not going to give you the order where I had them, but so far we are 2 for 2 on our list.
I might swerve here a little bit. Okay, so number 3 on my list, it's March 13th against the Lakers on TNT. I love whenever we get Giannis LeBron matchups. And last year we didn't see LeBron at all during any of the Milwaukee Bucks LA Laker matchup. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this is the year when we get to see those 2 on the court again. It is the first night of a back-to-back for the Lakers. They have us, and then they go against the Nuggets the very next night. So I'm hoping again that they'll choose to play against the Bucks, maybe rest against the Nuggets on that one. And on top of that, too, it's just part of that really tough March slate of games that the Bucks are going to have this year. So it's just one of those games within that stretch, but also just I love LeBron Giannis matchup. So that's number 3 on my list.
I did not have this one. So here's our first little
Like it.
deviation there. But I did kind of come back to it a little bit of, I mean, we've reached the point too where you never know. This could be your last chance seeing LeBron. So
Exactly.
I think that was part of your thinking. Not so much the intrigue either over LeBron and Bronny playing together, but just the fact that this could be it, right? Like every single year from here on out, this could be the LeBron James retirement tour.
Exactly. We don't know how many more times he's going to come through to that point. So that's definitely up on my list. There's an honorable mention that has that same tone that we can talk about a little bit later. But number 4 is going in a different direction. We're talking about the legend of LeBron and wanting to see Giannis match up against him. My number 4 game is the future greatness of Victor Wembanyama. So the January 8th matchup against the Spurs, an ESPN game as well. Giannis and Wemby, like I don't think there's too much more that needs to be said. And we only got to see those two guys go against each other once last year. The first matchup, I believe it was Wemby that wasn't playing, but the first game when we saw Giannis and Wemby,
second one,
amazing game. Amazing game. And Giannis had like 44 in that game. Wemby had like 27 or something. Like it was great. And I got to see more of that.
Again, I did not have this, but it was one I thought long and hard about because I mean, this could be the year that I'm not going to the hyperbolic levels we've seen others of Wemby's going to be the best player in the league in a year. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think he's going to be the best player in the league this year, but I mean, the ascent is there. And as we mentioned, the game in San Antonio last year between these two teams, if we see another one of those, that's what made you really think long and hard. But I did not include this. So we went 2 for 2 and now 0 for 2. So see what the last one is.
Finish up on the same page here. My 5th most anticipated game is November 10th against the Boston Celtics. It is the second matchup against Boston and the only one that is here in Milwaukee. And on top of that, there is no rest disadvantage for the Bucks like in their first matchup. In the very first game against Boston this year, it goes the Bucks are in Brooklyn and then they go to Boston. So the second matchup, no rest disadvantages, the only game in Milwaukee. Whenever Boston comes to town or whenever the Bucks are playing Boston, it's always an event with how these two teams have been going back and forth over the last few years. So that was my number 5 on my list. Did that one make yours?
Technically, yes. So that was, well, I suppose technically no. That was in my honorable mention category. So if we just go with a straight up 5, I did have a Celtics game. It was not that one. So not quite as much overlap as I anticipated that we would have. Very, very interesting. I have my list. We'll get into that. And then we both mentioned a couple of games that I just gave one of mine away that we came back to quite a bit, but ultimately left off of our list. We will share those as well coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. Well, passion, drive, and patience, that is the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of the day. For your second listen, we invite you to enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast, as there is no off season in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from both national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so time to get to my list now, Camille. So we had two that checked off on both of our lists. I'm going to start rather boring, and it was one that you had, and I mean, it's the place to start. It is most anticipated because it's the first chance we get to see of this collection, and that is the season opener in Philadelphia against the 76ers. We haven't had this conversation too much. We brought it up in the past, but when you search for who is the Bucks' biggest rival, I mean, we touched on the Indiana Pacers last year, but there's a number of teams that have kind of floated in and out of that conversation. The Celtics are certainly up there. The Miami Heat, given the playoff history, are up there. As of last year, the Indiana Pacers are up there. Maybe we're starting to see a case with the New York Knicks re-entering that conversation. The Philadelphia 76ers seem like they are the team that Bucks fans want to be the ultimate rival. You go back to the Barbs trade between ownership groups too, about process versus results. Giannis and Joel Embiid, some memorable games. We mentioned third straight year they're opening the season against each other. And the St. Patrick's Day game at Fiserv a couple of years ago where Embiid went for 50 and Giannis, I think, had 48. So they've always kind of circled each other. And I think the fact that we still have not seen these two teams play in the playoffs just kind of adds to it as well. So this, for me, for the obvious reason of this is where the campaign gets started, this is number one.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, again, that was one that was on my list as well. And your point about the rivalry between the two franchises, I think, can't be understated. It's one of those ones where for years, ever since Embiid came and the Bucks were becoming who they were becoming, we wanted to see that playoff matchup. But at least we know for the third year running, we're going to have them to open up the season. And it's going to be another team, which Philly and Milwaukee, you hear most often, along with New York, as those teams to compete against Boston. So it's also like that hierarchy in the East between those two whenever they match up.
Number two on my list, you did not have this. It's more of a sentimental pick, and that is April 1st, when Mike Budenholzer and the Phoenix Suns come to Milwaukee, and to see Bud back in Milwaukee and to see what I assume is going to be a very, very warm welcome and standing ovation for the coach that brought the Bucks their second championship in team history. And a guy that I think the further removed you are from the Mike Budenholzer era, the more beloved he has become. Not that he was a hated coach, but as you and I learned, it got to be very polarizing those last 2 years in Milwaukee. But I think as he took that year off of basketball, and look, it also helped that you saw last year, like, not that easy, is it, guys? That I think the crowd, the fans, have even more high regard for Bud. So that is number two on my list, just to see the reception that he gets April 1st when he returns to Milwaukee.
Yeah, that was one of my honorable mention games for all the reasons that you mentioned, in addition to Kevin Durant coming to town. Like, there's a theme you'll see when I get to my
Bradley Beal. I mean, who can avoid seeing him?
Who doesn't want to see Bradley Beal? But no, like, for sure, that's definitely one of those games I'm most looking forward to as well. Number
three on my list is a game that you mentioned as well. It is in the NBA Cup, November 22nd at Fiserv Forum against the Indiana Pacers. The intrigue of the NBA Cup, the fact that these two teams met in the East Final of the NBA Cup a season ago, of course, the rivalry between those two teams, and it's our first glimpse at that rivalry this season, the Bucks and the Indiana Pacers, November 22nd.
Yeah, and I do wonder too, I would assume so, but I haven't heard anything about it. Are they going to bring back the alternate NBA Cup floors?
Yeah, I haven't heard.
Because that was one thing, I mean, some of the combinations were crazy clashing, but I like that it felt different. So that's one thing with the NBA Cup games where I'm like, I hope that they do keep the branding as something separate during the regular season as well.
the different courts. That's where you saw what the City Edition jerseys were worn to by the home team in those games. So yeah, and look, that's a whole nother conversation too of the jerseys the Bucks are going to be wearing this year. What's the City Edition jersey? I think we've all kind of felt like, all right, just at least in terms of scratching the surface and the obvious low-hanging fruit, we've crossed it all off. We brought back the purple. We brought in cream colored. We did the Mecca floor. What else is there? So very curious to see what the Bucks will unveil for that. And do we see retro jerseys this year too, similar to what they wore in the Mecca game against the Boston Celtics? Cool. So that's another big piece that's yet to be determined. Okay, number 4 on my list is a matchup with the Boston Celtics, not the one that you mentioned. It is on the road, December 6th in Boston. I chose this one because this is the last meeting in the regular season between these two teams, December 6th, and they're done. All of them out of the way that early into the season. But because it's the final one and because you will have had a month and a half sample size of basketball, that it's not the true feeling out process where it's still, but that was, I mean, it's still early, but it's not, well, that was really early in the season. When we go back to that Sixers game last year, the opener of, man, that was so great, but that was early. And if you would have told me everything that was going to unfold after. So this is a little further down the road. You don't have to worry about a back-to-back either as you do in that first matchup. And I suppose with the Celtics, it's your last true litmus test where you're the furthest you get in your schedule with them before potentially, seeing them 6 months later in all likelihood in the playoffs?
Yeah, I thought you were also going to mention it's Giannis's birthday on December 6th. So birthday Giannis normally does some pretty spectacular things. So I would love a big birthday game for Giannis. And that's an ESPN game too. Yeah. So a national game, show it on your birthday, Giannis. I would love to see that.
5th and final pick. Very similar logic. It is another game against the Philadelphia 76ers. April 3rd in Philadelphia. I think that's a Sunday afternoon game. And that has the potential to bring a whole lot of intrigue. If the Bucks are playing to the level of our expectations, we expect the Sixers to be up there as well. You're getting into the final 10 days of the regular season, week of the regular season at that point. It could be a very important game. It could determine seeding, and it could be a playoff preview of sorts, if you will. I don't think you're going to be at that point on the calendar where you're looking to, okay, let's massage the schedule a bit. Let's get some rest, and maybe we can drop back a seeding line. Still a little too early for that. So assuming both teams are dealing with optimal health, that is going to be a very, very interesting game. And in terms of what it means, it's going to carry more value than the season opener between these two teams.
Yeah, because at that point, you're at your version of yourself that's closest to that playoff run. Like we mentioned, so much can change over the course of the year. This is post-trade deadline. This is the team as it's going to be heading into the playoffs. So that's a big game. That is a TNT game. It's a Thursday night game on TNT on the 4th or the 3rd of April. And it's the last TNT game the Bucks have, last national TV game that the Bucks have of the season. So I agree with you. That should be a big one.
So my 5, the season opener in Philly against the Sixers, the home game April 1st against the Phoenix Suns in the return of Mike Budenholzer, the debut of the NBA Cup scheduled for the Bucks November 22nd at home against the Pacers, December 6th, Giannis's birthday in Boston against the Celtics, and then April 3rd in Philadelphia against the 76ers. Leave your thoughts in the comments as well. Anything that you think is a glaring omission here, or if you disagree with the rankings that we put out here in the order of intrigue with these games. And when we come back, we'll wrap it up with some that just missed the cut for both of us. We'll get into that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks. All right, Camille, I put together, 3 actual games and one, we'll say asterisk, that I had for just missing the cut. I'll start with mine.
Okay.
Because there is some overlap, at least one of them. One you mentioned, that is the game against the Boston Celtics on the 10th, the home game that the Bucks have. No back-to-back to worry about there, and it's the only home game you have against that Celtics team. All the reasons that you went over as well. And like the challenge of this was to not just, every Celtics game, every Sixers game, maybe a Knicks game and a Pacers game. But that was the number one that I left off. Another one is another team that I had on my list. New Year's Eve. The Bucks are playing in the afternoon on New Year's Eve. Number one, I think we talked about this on the actual schedule release episode. I am all for this. As somebody that has worked on the broadcast for now 10 years, it feels like the Bucks have played on New Year's Day every single year. Every year I've been involved, and it's one thing to look. I don't treat New Year's Eve as I used to when I was younger, so that's not all of it. But it's one thing to have that holiday where it's okay. It's back to work the next day, and knowing, oh man, I got a game today. Can we at least do the game early in the afternoon? It was always like a 7:00 game, and it always seemed like it was against either the Wizards or the Pistons every year on New Year's Day. So a New Year's Eve game in the afternoon. And oh, by the way, it's in Indianapolis. It's against those hated Indiana Pacers. And I think that's the first time the Bucks are in Indy
I think so,
that season too. So the reception the Bucks will get there. The other game that I had was January 28th in Portland against the Blazers, because there's been more time. And I think Dame is in a better spot. The Blazers are in a better, the whole thing, the way it came about last year, it was very awkward and you didn't know what to expect going into Portland. I don't know that Dame knew how to handle the emotions either. And now you've had some more time to be removed from it. And again, the story that Jim Owczarski did when he was with Dame at his camp just a couple of weeks ago too, when you saw the love for Damian Lillard and kids showing up to his camp in Blazers and Bucks jerseys. I think this one is going to be even more special because of the time that Dame has had to process and deal with all of this, and Blazers fans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always going to be a special game when a franchise legend comes back into town. There's always going to be something to that.
We hope to never know.
Like the first time is the first time. So there's just a novelty of that. But as much love as Dame has for the city, for that area, and again, he still has his roots there. So that's always going to be a fun one, I think, as long as Dame is a Buck.
Final one that I had on the honorable mention list. It is not an actual game. I'm kind of cheating here.
Oh,
It is 5 games, and it is that it's not even West Coast, because this is one of the weird trips where they broke up the Western Conference teams, but the 5-gamer that's against the Lakers, against the Warriors, against the Kings, against the Suns, and against the Denver Nuggets. Traditionally, we have seen Lakers and Clippers back-to-back games, back-to-back days in a lot of cases. They're not sharing the same arena anymore, so maybe that's part of it. But you always had like Phoenix, Denver, Utah, Portland would be lumped together, and the California teams lumped together. They've gone half and half on this road trip, so there's intrigue there. And then also, okay, we talked a lot about that 5-game road trip last year and how it was kind of are we sure about this? I want to see what this team looks like on a trip like that with more time and in year 1.5 or 2 of Doc Rivers.
yeah, and that's fair. Like we've mentioned before, the March schedule for the Bucks it's a tough slate, and having that West Coast trip smack dab in the middle of it just amps that up. But to your point about how the Bucks performed during this past season's West Coast trip, definitely want to see how it looks for them this upcoming year. Were those all of your? Those were all of your.
Those were all of mine. So now I'm curious to hear what yours that just missed the cut were.
So we had some overlap. The April 1st game against Phoenix was on my list as well. Bud's return, and then Big 3 versus Big 3. You know, the Phoenix Big 3.
Houston Rockets. Oh. So I thought you were going with the rookie of Reed Sheppard.
No. Phoenix, we gotta get KD, Beal, and Book against Giannis.
I'm sorry, who is the third in that group?
Devin Booker?
Oh, well, no, Booker's fine. Booker and KD, but
Bradley Beal, you're not
going Ryan Dunn for the third, or Bradley Beal?
Iguodala, I gotta see Oso come back as well. The Marquette ties there. So I'm looking forward to the Phoenix game. I also had the Golden State game. So it's another one of those games that's in that 5-game West Coast trip, March 20th at Golden State. Steph versus Dame. Not sure how many more times we get that matchup as well. And I
Well, and
always
not
love
to
it.
cut you off, last year was the first time I remember I had the number on our pregame, but it was years since
Since
those
they
2 had
played.
been on the floor together. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Excluding
again,
all-star games.
right. No, I mean, we know how they play all-star games. We don't that don't even count. But no, it's again, when you get a chance to see like legends go up against each other or just guys who haven't been on the court together for a long time. It was like when we found out like LeBron and KD hadn't played each other in years
Yeah.
on the court because of injuries just messing up the timing. So that was one that was on my list as well. And then here's a random one. Halloween, October 31st in Memphis. Again, it's another one of those situations where we all remember the Memphis game last season when it was like, how did we lose to all of these backups in Memphis right before the All-Star break? But this year, it's a team where we get to see Ja Morant again. We haven't seen Ja for a long time. He's one of my favorite young players in the league, and just getting a chance to see him is an early season game. So theoretically, everyone should be healthy, should be ready to go. So I'm super excited to be able to see Ja Morant hoop again, especially against Dame.
Ja Morant, Zach Edey, Marcus Smart will get a
Yeah.
chance to see. Like, they are a very, very interesting team this year, the Memphis Grizzlies, because I think we all expect them to be a playoff team. And when you look back at, I mean, you talked about that game last year, and man, how did the Bucks lose this game and the GG Jackson game? Look at the players that played in that game for Memphis, and then look at where they're at this year. Like, that's what's remarkable, and that's what's going to be very, very intriguing about the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah.
And Taylor Jenkins. I mean, I know Bud is not here, but
Still a
Taylor
connection.
Jenkins. Yeah, Taylor Jenkins and Darvin Ham and their connection.
Always. And then one more, another random one, but this is my list. This is my most anticipated matchups that I want to see. And then that is November 23rd against the Charlotte Hornets. Charles Lee coming back to Milwaukee as head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. In addition to that, LaMelo Ball. I'm a big Melo fan. And whenever it seems like LaMelo comes to Milwaukee, it seems like he always puts on a show. So I'm definitely looking forward to that matchup as well. So that's like my honorable mentions list for most anticipated Bucks games for me.
Leave your thoughts in the comments here if there's anything that you disagree with or any games that you feel like we missed. I didn't really focus on a lot of the individual matchups, like you had Wemby on there. We didn't have any Knicks games either, which is mildly interesting. So it was more storyline that we focused on as the intriguing games that we deemed, at least for this upcoming season here for the Bucks. As we start to wrap things up here, Camille, not a whole lot of news to get caught up on. It is a relatively dead spot on the NBA calendar, although the two things that stood out, really one, and they're kind of intertwined, is I saw a lot of backlash yesterday to the announcement that Amazon has pulled their offer from Diamond Sports Group. So it looks like we're stuck with Bally from here on out.
Yeah. And listen, when we say stuck with Bally, we do not mean like the announcing team. Like, we love the team, the crew that calls the games. It's just the actual service of Bally itself, where it's like, it's a headache more times than not.
I'll say this too. I don't want to, I don't want to incriminate anyone here. Do you subscribe to cable or streaming?
I have a DirecTV, was it Stream?
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where I'm kind of at. I mean, maybe it's just we are out of touch on this, but when I saw the reaction, look, I get it. I've tried to use the Bally Sports app in a pinch.
It's bad.
Right. When so case in point, when we do road games, I have to watch the game on my own at the radio station. I don't have any secret setup that they send me. I've asked for it several times because we use that during the bubble. But nonetheless, so that's what I rely on. And there's been some moments where I couldn't get my DirecTV. I have the same as you to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to rely on, all right, I'm just going to sign in to the Bally app, and it's just an absolute nightmare. So I get that. But I'm also under the assumption that I would say about 3/4 of fans, if you are a sports fan, you're subscribing to a streamer, you have a cable subscription, or you know where to find a stream to it. So I think all the complaints are heavily around the Bally Sports app, but I feel like that's just a lot of one-off use. And for the most part, if you are a true Bucks fan, you probably have other methods of watching it.
Yeah, and it just sucks too, because I know Bally introduced like, hey, you can do the monthly subscription to Bally to watch these regional sport networks and their teams. And it's like, if that's the only way that you're able to watch them, that's tough, especially being local. So I was really excited last year when the Bucks had some games that were broadcast over the air, which I know for some people that caused some problems as well, because people don't have antennas anymore. But listen, y'all, head to Amazon, get y'all an antenna. It's not even that expensive. They're not the same as the 90s when they were the big, metal pokey things with the sticks. So you can get like a little square box that you can have, just
stick it to the wall.
Yeah, it blends right on in. You can hide it a little bit, but I love the over the air broadcast. So I hope we have some more of those this season as well.
The NBA is moving quickly towards resolving their case with Warner Brothers Discovery too. I mean, I don't foresee anything changing there. I think we're kind of locked in. These are going to be the partners, not this year, but next year, the following season, when it's Amazon and NBC that enter the chat here for the NBA.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. Although during the Olympics, it was like they played the round ball rock.
Yeah.
Every time they got a chance to, like, as a reminder, like, don't forget, y'all, this is coming back. This is coming back.
And I suppose one very under the radar thing to sneak in as we start to wrap here. You mentioned the rankings for NBA 2K for a few players. It's already like a week away that game comes out. September 4th release date.
Listen, it's September 4th if you pre-ordered. I'm a big 2K fan of knowing. If you're not familiar with it, find me the same ad from my Twitter. That's my PSN as well. So if you come across me in these 2K streets, be kind. And also don't take offense when you catch that L, because I'm handing out all kinds of L's in 2K this upcoming year. I'm going to do the Play Now, the Bucks. They'll be doing the My Career. I'm even getting into some My Team action. So I'm very excited. The 2K release is like a holiday for me. I'm very excited.
September 4th if you pre-order. Otherwise, I think it's September 7th. It's always that Friday, 6th. Okay.
Yep.
I'm very curious to see the ranking for my guy, Chris Livingston. I'm also very curious to see if they updated the coaching models, and do we have the Doc Rivers goatee this upcoming season?
Let's see how realistic it is.
So we are a week away from that. That'll do it for today's show. We got at least one more show this week. TBD on the volume. As we get into September, you've noticed we moved to about 3 days a week that we've been doing this. But as we get into September a little bit more, we're going to pick it back up. Second or so week of the month, we're going to get back to 5 days a week, because by that point, training camp's around the corner, and there's going to be even more storylines, even more lists that are coming out to react to, and whatnot. As a reminder, too, before we do let you go here, as you tuned into Locked On Bucks, be sure to check out Locked On NBA. The season never ends. You get national and local expertise on that show. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description of today's show, so you don't even have to search for it. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.